In 1976, inside a suburban California garage, two young dreamers, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, were building something the world didn't quite understand yet. It wasn't just a computer, it was the beginning of a revolution. The Apple. I was crude, a wooden box with circuitry sold to hobbyists. But in that humble box lay a bold idea that computing could leave the labs and corporations and enter everyday life. The real breakthrough came a year later with the Apple II. Sleek for its time, colorful in its display, it wasn't just for engineers, it was for classrooms, families, and small businesses. Suddenly, Apple wasn't just another startup. It was the company bringing personal computing to the masses. By the early 1980s, Apple was riding high, and Steve Jobs, barefoot, brash, and visionary, was its poster child. Then came the Macintosh. Launched in 1984 with one of the most famous commercials in history, directed by Ridley Scott, Apple declared itself the hammer that would shatter conformity. The Mac was elegant, with a graphical interface that made computing intuitive, even fun. It didn't just work, it inspired. Apple was no longer just making computers, it was making culture. But for all its creativity, Apple stumbled in business. Microsoft's Windows spread faster, cheaper, and wider. The Macintosh, though iconic, was expensive and niche. By the late 1980s, Apple's dominance began to slip, and worse, the company's own house was in chaos. Steve Jobs, clashing with executives and directors, was forced out of the very company he had built. For Apple, the dream began to unravel. The 1990s were Apple's dark age. Leadership turnover, failed products, dwindling market share. Apple was bleeding out. Its designs couldn't compete with the cheaper clones flooding the market. The brand that once symbolized rebellion and creativity was becoming irrelevant. Analysts predicted bankruptcy. By 1997, Apple was just months away from collapse. But fate had other plans. That year, Apple made a desperate decision. It bought a struggling software company called Next, and with it, brought back Steve Jobs. The prodigal founder returned, not just with new technology, but with a fire to save his company. What he found was a brand in ruins. What he built would be a company that didn't just recover, but would change the world all over again. When Steve Jobs returned in 1997, Apple was weeks from bankruptcy. To many, it seemed too late. But Jobs had something no balance sheet could measure. Vision. His first move. Simplify. Apple's bloated product line was cut down to just 4 categories. And then came the splash of color that changed everything. The iMac. Released in 1998, the iMac wasn't just a computer. It was a statement. Transparent, playful, and friendly. It stood out in a sea of beige boxes. People didn't just buy it for its specs, they bought it because it felt alive. Overnight, Apple was cool again. But Jobs wasn't aiming to just save Apple. He wanted to reinvent it. In 2001, he stepped onto a stage and pulled a tiny white device from his pocket. The iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket, he said. It was simple, bold, and instantly irresistible. Apple wasn't just a computer company anymore. It was becoming the heartbeat of digital music. The iPod, combined with iTunes, didn't just make money. It reshaped an entire industry. And then, in 2007, lightning struck again. Jobs unveiled the iPhone, a phone, a music player, and an internet device all in one. It was sleek, it was touch-based, and it was unlike anything the world had seen. Critics doubted it, competitors scoffed. But within years, the iPhone had redrawn the map of technology, dethroning giants like Nokia and BlackBerry, and creating a mobile revolution that defined the 21st century. Apple followed with the App Store, unleashing a digital gold rush, and later the iPad, which blurred the line between laptop and tablet. Each launch wasn't just a product, it was an event. People camped outside Apple stores. Ads like "Think Different" turned customers into believers. Apple wasn't just selling devices. It was selling a philosophy of creativity, simplicity, and elegance. By the 2010s, Apple had built more than products. It had built an ecosystem. Macs, iPhones, iPads, Apple Watches, and services like iCloud all worked seamlessly together. Once you stepped into Apple's world, it was hard to leave. That stickiness turned customers into loyalists and Apple into the most valuable company on earth, crossing the $3 trillion mark in 2022. But Apple's rise wasn't without controversy. Critics targeted its closed ecosystem, labor practices in overseas factories, and sky-high prices. Lawsuits and antitrust battles questioned its dominance. Yet time and again, Apple's allure proved unshakable. The sleek devices in white boxes kept flying off shelves. Today, the Apple logo isn't just a brand. It's a cultural symbol, glowing on laptops in coffee shops, shining in pockets around the world. Apple changed the world once by bringing computers into the home. It changed it again by putting the internet, music, and communication into our hands. And with ventures into health, augmented reality, and AI, it may be gearing up to do it a third time. From garage hobbyists to a trillion-dollar titan, Apple's story is one of vision, risk, and reinvention. Twice on the brink of history, twice rewriting it. In the end, Apple didn't just build technology, it built the future. Apple's story is proof that vision, risk, and reinvention can change the world, not once, but twice. But here's the question. What do you think Apple's next big revolution will be? Will it transform health, cars, or maybe even reality itself? Drop your predictions in the comments. I want to hear your take. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the rise of Apple, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more epic stories of companies that shaped our world, and share this video with someone who needs inspiration. The future is just getting started.